Yeah. So my name is Emile. I'm a fourth year PhD student at York. And my presentation today, Migration, Delivery, and Resistance by Food Couriers in Paris and Toronto, is from parts of my thesis. And today I'm going to focus mostly on the Paris case, but if you want to talk about the Toronto case, it's also part of my thesis. And so, yeah, in Paris, I did basically interviews with sans-papier food couriers, undocumented food couriers, and also union activists. And it basically, for me, started in the summer of 2020. So this platform called CRIMT2022 hired a lot of sans-papier riders. And during the whole pandemic, they basically delivered for that platform. And after a bunch of news media articles, some journalism that reported that CRIMT2022 hired these riders only with their passport because they didn't have a visa. The sans-papier riders decided to organize strikes with the help of the CGT, which is a traditional union in France. And basically, they decided to block 3 of the main hubs downtown Paris. So CRIMT2022 is a platform that delivers home-cooked meals, so they have to have physical locations. And the sans-papier riders, they blocked 3 of the main hubs for 3 days. And the platform decided to negotiate 100 visa for the 200 fired riders. And so this is the first kind of encounter with the sans-papier rider strikes. In the fall of 2021, another platform called Stuart, which you guys have in the UK. So we saw a lot of we saw some strikes by sans-papier food Stuart couriers, and Stuart is also it's owned by the bank La Poste, which is a state-owned bank. So you have these sans-papier riders that are subletting accounts for state-owned platforms, and the platform signed an agreement with a grocery giant called Monoprix in France. And following pay cuts and some harsh measures, the riders went on strike with the CGT again. And this brings us to fall 2022 today. We are seeing right now a lot of protests by Uber Eats couriers following mass deactivations. So a couple of weeks ago, I think Uber Eats decided to deactivate almost 3,000 accounts from its platform. And so this sparked all these protests. So it was organized by the CLAP, Collectif des Libraires Autonomes de Paris, and the CGT. And so they were demanding 3 things that you can see here. So droit de défense avant blocage, which means protection before deactivation. Régularisation des sans-papiers, because one of the problem with misclassification in France is that it doesn't lead to visa to papers. So you can work 10 years, 10,000 hours. It's never going to get you to papers because you're considered independent contractor. And finally, pay raise. And so one of the questions from my thesis is how do food delivery couriers, notably migrants, but in this case, sans-papier, come to work in and experience platform labor in Toronto and Paris. So in Toronto, we see a lot of international students, refugees, and permanent residents. And so what I'm going to discuss today is that citizenship status actually plays a crucial role in the everyday life of food delivery riders that are immigrants. And this is something that I encountered in my fieldwork because I was asking questions about algorithms and algorithmic management and so on. But all riders wanted to talk to me about is the problem of visas and papers, because they were basically subletting accounts, right? It allows platform to profit off precarity because I'm gonna show you layers of precarities that sans-papier riders experience, it makes them really that they have to stay online and unpaid 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. And so it allows platforms to have this ready-to-work workforce. And finally, well, they can access papers because of misclassification. So with my committee, divided into 2 dimensions, because I'm in urban geography, there's an urban component. So critical urban studies and technoscience, we can talk about this later, but basically the literature on platform urbanism and how platforms are involved with the state, post-colonial urban studies, and how citizenship and migration trajectories lead to platform work in urban areas. A labor dimension, which is inspired by a labor geography project, the role of traditional unions in organizing these riders, and finally the privatization and commodification of social reproduction. And so I did fieldwork in Paris this spring, where I did interviews with sans-papier couriers and organizers for the club, the CGT. MDC is the House of Couriers, so it was basically there was actually just one employee there, and it was a project put up by the city of Paris to have this space where riders could hang out, have a coffee, charge their phone, but it turned out to be just a place where they could get legal advice to have papers and visas and so on. And so the city just didn't expect this. And the worker there told me that they're probably not going to do the project again next year, because they were seeing 25 riders per day just to have legal counsel for papers and co-op cycle. I did fieldwork in Toronto this summer, where I interviewed migrant couriers and again organizers for CUP-W, Gig Workers United, and so on. And also been doing Uber Eats. You hear echo or no? So I've been doing Uber Eats in Toronto, and I'm part of a project with the INRS where we're interviewing young couriers in Toronto and Montreal. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the interdependency between the rider that is renting or subletting the account to the owner of the account of the platform. And this is really one of the, I think, least, because food delivery has seen a lot of attention, but I've barely read anything about subletting and like the consequences of subletting accounts. And in Paris, we don't really know how many are renting, but from what I've been hearing when I was there, it's maybe 1 out of 4 or like 1 out of 5. So that's like a lot of riders. And the result is that the precarity is spread throughout a number of factors. So first, when the riders are injured, and they all get injured because it's a dangerous profession, they're pretty scared to go to the hospital or reach for help or for care because of deportation. And so an example here is I hurt myself and I didn't have the paper, so I was scared. I didn't go to the hospital. And then another aspect of precarity in food subletting account is that the owner of the account can pretty much do whatever he wants because he's got the password to the platform. And so sometimes they're not going to get the whole money that they work for. So, for example, I worked for a week, he told me the next week, and then after 2 weeks, he gave me nothing. And then what happens is that they just change the password on the platform. And so they can't access their account and they can't work anymore. And so, so usually subletting can occur through like communities or neighborhoods, but we see a lot of this on Facebook. And so the number of scams are are really present. And then finally, the 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 other aspects of precarity that makes it difficult for food writers is because of the citizenship status, a lot are in housing precarity, so they can't get access to like government housing or just even regular housing because they don't have credit cards or bank accounts or so on. And so a lot of them are sleeping on couches of friends or in the streets. And so like the online time is basically like survival time. And I've had a lot of couriers told me that when they started to sublet accounts, it was basically a no choice situation. So for example, when you arrive in a new country, you have no parents, you don't have papers, you have to survive, so you're subletting accounts basically. And here, it didn't really help me subletting an account. It's only about survival. And so, and finally, the last aspect of precarity is police, because since like the 80s, but especially since the 2000s, there's been an increase in police controls. And a lot of the riders, they don't use scooters, for example, because it's going to be more common to get controlled by police to check on certificates and so on. The e-bikes too, the e-bike rentals, they can get stolen, but then they're not going to go see the police because their e-bikes were stolen, and so that's a couple $1,000s. And also the bus pass, because a lot of the sans-papier riders, they live in the suburb or they like couch surf in the suburb. They have to either pay for the bus pass, which is 100 euros per month, or just jump the train, and so they're going to have control by the transportation agents and so on. And so all these like layers of precarity creates this like workforce that is like always online and a lot of the time unpaid, and they can deliver for these platforms. And so the biggest markets are all the biggest platforms. The biggest markets for subletting accounts are basically the biggest platforms. So you're going to have Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Steward Fish Tea, and so on. But that doesn't mean that the sans-papier riders, because they do like this unfree labor, that they are like docile bodies. So the resistance movements, like I started the presentation with, we see a lot of similarities with the traditional resistance movements by the sans-papiers since the 60s, right? And so you have this interdependency between the regularized citizen and the sans-papier. The confusions in like the migration policies, in the what's called the circular valse in France, hasn't been updated since 2012, and so this is why also misclassification cannot lead to visa, and this is one of the main focus of the movement right now. Hypocrisy of the employers, which is another thing that we see often, like Fish Tea, for example, that is just hiring sans-papiers because they expect them to be cheap and compliant labor. And finally, a role for traditional unions. And so we see that the resistance movement in platform food delivery riders are really part of a long tradition of sans-papier strikes in France. And so so my conclusions for this presentation is that the migrant riders' labor is essential to the platform profits in Paris and Toronto. We don't really know how many, and because the turnover rate is so high, but like the fact that they have this like ready to deliver workforce is important for their profits. The platform labor plays a huge role in the migration trajectories of the newcomers. There's this like the amazing movie. It's called After the Crossing from 2020, I think, and it's like you see the journey through of like undocumented migrants towards Paris, and once you land in Paris and you have nothing, subletting an account is like the not the only option, but like one of. And finally, the platformization and the resistance to platformization is part of a historical and colonial context like Paris, but also in Toronto. So that's that.